Hey everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back for the 204th Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. It's the night before Christmas, so we're only going to do an hour today, the same with next week, which is the night before my 80th, 79th birthday. But I told my kids I am going to tell people I'm 80 because, so the ninth year, I always jump ahead. I did that when I was 39. I started telling people I was 40 because I didn't want to be mistaken for Jack Benny. I don't know how many of you are old enough to get that. But listen, we are meeting today because of Leonard Peltier. Joe Biden just freed another, I think, 37, 38, 39 people off of federal death row because we know that when Donald Trump gets in there, he's going to execute everybody he can. And I'm glad that Joe Biden has done that, but we are still waiting for him to free Leonard Peltier or at least remand him to the custody of his tribe. It's ridiculous. Then we're going to be joined by the great Mimi German, our poet laureate. Who's he going to do a poem or read us a letter from Albert Einstein? Either one will be great, Mimi. We're going to talk. Mike Hirsch is going to talk to us about establishing a support network for people who might be attacked in the coming year or two or three from Donald Trump. We want to talk about a fluoridation issue. A lot of people are jumping up and down on Bobby Kennedy, but many of us really agree with the idea of getting fluoride out of our water, and we want to talk about that. David Saltman is with us to discuss the cause of the 14th Amendment, which many people believe really disqualifies Trump from becoming president at all. We've heard that raised, and Dave is going to talk to us about Leonard Tribe, the great Harvard professor, law professor, raising the issue. We're starting with over 40 people. As I say, it is the night before Christmas, so we're really going to go an hour. Let's start with TATANKA. You are stationary in your car, which we do allow. As long as you have if you have the motor running, please crack a window and tell us the latest, please, on Leonard Peltier.
Well, Chase Arnaiz texted me a couple hours ago and said he was driving his car, would be out of cell phone or internet range shortly, well into the next couple days. And sorry he can't be with us. I did ask him about next Monday. He said he will be in touch. I do know from prior winter solstice times over the last decade that the Lakota people are in solstice ceremony during much of this time period and out of touch with most of the modern world for anywhere from a week to 3 or 4 weeks at times. So people on this GREEP call of sluggers have heard Chase's personal testimony a few times, including once earlier this year when he related his own personal family history with Leonard, including the 2 years, 1971 and 1973, that preceded the standoff on Pine Ridge Reservation, which resulted in the accusation, totally debunked decades ago, of Leonard's guilt or innocence. He's innocent of all charges. So we heard from Chase the tragic story of the FBI funding arms to neighbors of those gunned down fellow Lakota people, FBI threatening them and their families if they wouldn't follow orders of the posse of FBI agents, and how those responsible within the FBI for a massacre, they say 70, but the Lakota people say it was well over 100 in 2 years, that then precipitated the elders having a call out to the American Indian movement, which brought Leonard out of Canada and down to basically provide witness and protection. And that those in the FBI hierarchy of that operation were promoted to the highest places, and that they have held forth along with the next generation that have followed them through all these decades of Leonard's imprisonment. So we know it's going to take ganas, it's going to take courage, guts to do the right thing, which is the reason why, we haven't had a Democrat or a Republican president release Leonard all these decades at 50, going 50 years in the 50th year now at his elder age, a man plagued with personal health maladies that will, in all likelihood, kill him and not too long if he can't get out of that prison. So let's not give up, keep the pressure on. We don't know what's happening around Joe Biden at this moment. So let's see if Chase or Takata or some other young one can show up next week to give us a report from Lakota country, even if it's the wonderful work, which I don't know if he talked much about, but I know at Romero, we've had him on a couple times on the Lakota Law Project about the amazing work going on with the elders, including Chase, passing on the medicine and traditions to the young ones at Pine Ridge and Standing Rock. So keep the pressure up, and we just keep our thoughts and our hopes and our prayers with Chase and with all the people trying to free Leonard and with Leonard himself.
Well, thank you for that, Tatanka. We are urging people to continue, call the White House, sign the petition, the Amnesty International petition. I put up a piece, Steve and Pete put it up at freepress.org about this. I mean, questioning. There's no doubt that if Joe Biden, well, let's put it this way, let's put it positively. The only way to save Leonard Peltier's life is for Joe Biden to let him out. He can pardon him. He can get clemency. This is the piece at freepress.org now. He can remand him to the tribe. I'm concerned if he does remand him to the tribe that Trump would send in the FBI again and try and pull him away from the tribe. But the Dave Saltman has pointed out there is a precedent for remanding a Canadian. There was a Canadian who was convicted of murder. He was in an American prison, and the government of Canada successfully petitioned to have him remanded. And there's no reason why Leonard Peltier couldn't be remanded to his tribe. Whether the tribe will be able to keep him in the face of Donald Trump, we don't know. But it is certainly something that Biden could do that is short of a pardon or clemency or anything like that. I mean, the logical thing to have done in the previous years was to give Leonard a new trial. He had two trials; they were both ridiculous, and we are convinced, most of us, of his innocence. But at very least, he never had a fair trial, and Biden with Kamala Harris or her background as a prosecutor, the very least they should have done over the past 4 years is, put him back on trial, and but they've not done that. The Democrats who have refused to let him out are Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and actually Jimmy Carter. Ronald Reagan, the two Bushes, and Trump haven't done it, but as many Democrats as Republicans have failed to take the obvious action here. So there is a petition up in Amnesty International. I would assume that's the primary petition. People from Nelson Mandela to Pope Francis to Desmond Tutu have asked that he be granted clemency or a pardon, and many, many, many of the people who were involved in those trials. On the other side, judges and prosecutors have asked that he be, set free. So, and clearly his life is on the line. He will not survive not being pardoned by Joe Biden. So, or some other method to get him out. So, MYLA RESON, did you want to say something? Oh, you're muted.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Wondering, we heard recently, I'm trying to remember, it was during a GREEP call, that there were a number of Native American or American Indian leaders who had a meeting with Biden about Leonard. Do we know who any of those individuals are who met with Biden? And have we gotten any reports back from those people about that meeting?
Yeah, there was a couple articles of it's an annual event, and there were a couple articles with photos and with the names of the different tribal members, and there was to be a personal off camera appeal by one of them, and it wasn't revealed who spoke to him, but they did know, they were told that he would not be making a decision at that moment. So we haven't heard anything since then. I do want to thank you, Harvey, for your article, Leonard, that you just wrote. It's an excellent. And I want to encourage people, if what happened at Varios Unidos on the day after Thanksgiving, where there was an amazing event open to the public, where a number of the Lakota people came down from the annual event on Alcatraz Island, and KPFA people were there, and it was an honoring of Leonard with a 12-foot statue that was made of a personal sketch that Leonard made of himself sitting in prison. And the whole history of AIM is there. It's still on. The public can go to Barrios Unidos in Santa Cruz. They own an entire city block there, and they're preparing to be a site of refuge when La Migra comes through, if Trump follows through on what he says he's going to do with immigration. But it was beautiful. Leonard's wife was there, and daughter, and a number of people who met with him. That statue may be going around because they realized if they can't have Leonard there, that statue draws people, and it's a beautiful rendering. And so if you ever get a chance to see that and catch the history and the photos going way back and all the people that were involved, you'll see people you recognize there. Those of us that are progressives that were there very early on. So
let's just keep at it. That's why we're meeting today instead of taking a vacation.
Yeah.
Hopefully next week we'll meet again and we'll celebrate, what needs to happen. But we need to keep the pressure on. So, Steve, if you want to post, I can't see the chat. If you want to put the link to the article from the Free Press, that would be great. And let's just hope, for his own sake, for God's sakes, Joe Biden should not have Leonard Peltier's blood on his hands. And he's the last one who can save Leonard's life. And let's just hope he rises to the occasion, for God's sakes. Pardon him, clemency, remand him to the tribe. Dave Saltman made a film about the Canadian Bruce Curtis, I think his name was, who was remanded to Canadian custody. It was a murder conviction. He had been in prison, so not for 50 years though, and he was not an indigenous, but he was Canadian, and the Canadian government put him in prison and then let him go. But here we are. So let's just pray that, and like Julian Assange, which seemed hopeless for many years, Julian is out on a beach somewhere in Australia with his family. I don't think Leonard will go to the beach, but let's at least hope he has the opportunity, at very least, to be with his tribe in Lakota country. So,
and I will be in touch with you about Chase, because if we have the opportunity to hear once again the wisdom that he shares about where we are with the whole, multi-century colonial experiment on Turtle Island here, which is the same experiment that's going on with the corporatocracy around the world. He really has some insight, and the change we want to see is not going to go any faster than going first in allyship with the Native people, because they've been living with this and they know the way out, and they are always offering a partnership hand, even as every treaty to their sovereignty signed by members of the United States government has been broken. They still hold out for truth and reconciliation, but starting with justice, right? And starting with the land that is theirs. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatanka. Much appreciated, and let's all do our best. You can see the article at freepress.org. It was also published at Smirking Chimp, which is a website that publishes a lot of really good stuff, but it needs to be supported, Smirking Chimp. Okay, you guys. Thank you. Thank you, Tatanka. You're free to go if you need
Thank
to.
you. You got Carol right next to me here.
Oh, there's
We're doing our
I
last minute
there. How
shopping.
are you? Carol, it's great. This is Carol. Great to see you both. And
Great to see you.
please
Thank you.
drive carefully.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Two fabulous, two people who are as great as human beings can get. So wonderful to have you both. Thank you. All right. Well, speaking of which, we have another such member of our species, Mimi German. Mimi is our poet laureate. Mimi, you have some options. You were going to tell us about Portland. You were going to read us a poem, or you're going to read us a letter from Albert Einstein. What is your pleasure?
Well, I decided that I would read a poem because there is history around this letter, which is a letter supposedly from Einstein, and I say supposedly because that's the glitch, to his daughter, which was really to his stepdaughter, but there is a question as to whether or not he actually wrote this letter. So I'm not going to
Well,
read
I want to mention that Mimi, maybe if you could post the link. There's a fabulous letter. I mean, as good as the letter can get from Albert Einstein, allegedly from Albert Einstein to his stepdaughter. And the latter is magnificent. Now, its authenticity has been challenged, but the same is true of the Chief Seattle speech. You know, we all grew up on this fabulous speech, allegedly by the chief in the Seattle. His name was Seattle or Sealth, and proclaiming the oneness of humankind with nature. And it's a great, we're not separate from the web of life. That's where that term comes from. And allegedly it was in a letter from Chief Seattle to Millard Fillmore in the 1840s, the president of the United States. And he was the president, he was the chief of the Northwestern tribes. So its authenticity has been challenged repeatedly. And I've read it, and the question of was it really from Chief Seattle is a valid question. But the fact is, it's a fabulous speech. I mean, it's a truly great speech. It does encapsulate much of the indigenous view of nature. It's a document well worth preserving. So, did Albert Einstein write this letter to his stepdaughter? Well, it's a hell of a great letter. So, whether he did or didn't, I don't know. But it's a fabulous piece. But Mimi, you get your choice.
I'll post it and then people can read it. The letter the letter is about love. And it was wonderful for me to read it because one of the things that I've always said for decades is that and actually found answers through some medicines from South America that said, yes, the answer is love. The answer has always been love. No matter how lost we get, the answer is love. Anyway, this is in the letter
Okay,
that supposedly Einstein
well,
wrote. So we'll post that.
please.
Um,
Do.
and the poem that I wrote is also in search of a how do we create a new way now that we are where we are. It's called Desert Solstice. Desert solstice, still, dark. Coyote howls from the hills, barking at stars. Willow branches breach desolation, such beggars with fingers bent, lacing pink and purple tulips to the sky. A petal of desert melts to my tongue, bitter curatives, medicine for a new dawn.
Wow, beautiful, Mimi, as always. Thank you so much, and
Thanks, Mark.
and thank you for posting that letter, whether or not it was from Albert Einstein. It's a great letter,
I'll grab that link now. Thank
please.
you.
And I will want to tell you that on the 21st, I had a big chocolate cake, and that was a dessert solstice. So there you go. Okay, terrible pun. Mike Hirsch. Sorry about that. Mike Hirsch, we've been talking a bit about establishing a network for people who might support network for people who might run into difficulty with the Trump regime. I know I read yesterday that the KGB and the FBI are now going to be merging. So if you can, that was also a joke, by the way, but if you can tell us, Mike, the kinds of things we've been thinking about in terms of establishing a support network for people who might come under attack in this coming regime.
Thanks so much, Sluggo. There's widespread fear throughout our nation, and in response to the widely publicized, openly stated threats from Trump and many of his nominees for high government office, threats that targeted immigrants, LGBTQ plus people, the press, his political enemies, and many others, I propose that we join together in a declaration of interdependence and launch something that I thought we could call the Niemöller Mutual Defense Society, named for the German pastor Martin Niemöller, who wrote the famous poem, First They Came for the Socialists, and I Didn't Speak Out, et cetera, et cetera. And then it ends, Then They Came for Me, and there was no one left to speak for me. We want to learn the lessons that the pastor explained. And if I can continue with a little bit of history, I think we
Please,
must.
yes, please do.
Thank you. We must hark back to the warnings from two leaders of the American Revolution. In 1776, John Hancock, the president of the Continental Congress, signed his name to the Declaration of Independence with this big flowing signature. We all recognize the huge signature there on the Declaration of Independence, but I don't know if we all remember what he said. He said, there must be no pulling different ways. We must all hang together. And then, according to a historian, Benjamin Franklin replied, yes, we must indeed all hang together, or most assuredly we shall all hang separately. Now, I guess it's like 250 years later, we face threats from another mad monarch, and we must all hang together. We must protect each other and defend each other's lives and limbs, or else most assuredly we shall all hang separately, or whatever the modern equivalent of execution might be. And we've had hideous and hurtful and heinous behavior from our government before. We talked about Leonard Peltier, which, this is an ongoing outrage which began even before the official launch of the United States of America, with Europeans inflicting massacres and horrible mistreatment of Native Americans in North America and South America alike. But I guess we're more focused on the continental United States and the horrendous behavior that was perpetrated against our indigenous forefathers and foresisters. People of color throughout our history have suffered at the hands of institutional power, whether it's slavery or Jim Crow or the ongoing voter suppression that we discussed previously. And now everybody's potentially under the gun. And so I think that now it's time for solidarity like never before. So I'm hoping that we can all band together and put together committees of correspondence, an underground railroad to help ferret people from places of peril to places of safety. There's a whole lot of historic lessons that we can learn from and implement. And I call upon everybody who hears my voice to spread the word that we need to create and form organized resistance against organized repression that we know is on the way.
Wow, well, there's a lot to say to that, Mike, and one of the we want to use this GREEP network to offer people in the coming years who may be assaulted by the government, either through lawsuits or incarceration. Well, I want to say the government, the regime. And to have perhaps lawyers available for people who will need them. I think we'd be foolish not to anticipate this. We have had two very dictatorial presidents who have actually assaulted individuals merely for speaking out. And those two, Richard Nixon would have, but he didn't have the clout given the divisions in American society at the time. But the two most repressive presidents that we have had in terms of incarcerating people for speaking out have been John Adams and Woodrow Wilson. And not George Washington, by the way. George Washington, my wife and I just watched a fabulous documentary on George Washington. He was actually quite a tolerant guy. And if ever, and here we are facing this, and I want to get Dave Saltman to talk about the 14th Amendment in a little bit, but George Washington twice could have been dictator of the United States and stepped away. And in both times, unprecedented in world history. In fact, after the revolution, when the revolution was won and the Treaty of Paris signed in 1783, George III, the King of England, heard that George Washington had resigned his command of the Revolutionary Army and had declined to take absolute power, which 99% of revolutionary leaders in the history of the world, when they win a revolution, they become dictators. I don't need to enumerate, Stalin, Lenin, Mao. I mean, it's a horrible litany of people who betrayed the revolutionary fervor. George Washington did not. George Washington, all he wanted to do was go back to his farm and raise hemp. And that's what, hemp and tobacco and whatever else they had. But nobody could believe that George Washington would step away from power. And then he did it a second time. When the Republic was established, George Washington was unanimously elected President of the United States twice, in 1789 and again in 1792, sorry. And then he could have been a third term. He could have been president for life, and he stepped away a second time. And that is the foundation of American democracy. It had not happened in world. Well, there was a guy in Italy, Mazzini, later who did that, and a guy earlier in Rome named Cincinnatus. There was a society of Cincinnatus that Washington belonged to. But the idea of someone stepping away from power was unheard of. And that is the basis, in many ways, of our republic. And here we have a guy coming into office who's already talking about a third term. I mean, and being president for life, literally. And so this is one of the things we face. John Adams, who was really a complicated guy, had a really thin skin. And there was allegedly, there was talk of war with France. There was already a war going on between England and France. And people who criticized Adams, and you got to read some of the stuff people were saying back then. The criticisms of Trump are mild compared to stuff that the people said about George Washington and John Adams. One thing about Washington and Adams, their critics both use the same term for them, toothless, which I can attest to. But Washington really was toothless. Adams was not, but they call him toothless anyway. And Adams and his wife Abigail, who should have known better, they had incredibly thin skins, and they passed the Sedition Act, and they threw people in prison merely for speaking negatively about the person of the president. It's outrageous. And then Woodrow Wilson was worse. Woodrow Wilson was a real dictator. I mean, he was a terrible authoritarian, a real terrible racist, very clear, outspoken racist, horrible in that respect. And Teddy Roosevelt, before him, who's very militaristic, was not that way. But Woodrow Wilson and John Adams literally put people in prison for criticizing them personally. It's outrageous even in private conversations. One of the people that John Adams put in prison, by the way, was Ben Franklin's grandson, who, followed in his grandfather's footsteps. But nonetheless, so Trump coming in, talking about doing this kind of thing, we need to be prepared. We need to have lawyers. We need to have a network. We need to have a website. Well, we can use the GREEP website, but we have to be ready for this regime to arrest people for speaking out, and we can't be surprised. And we have to have a legal team in place to do this kind of defense work and to give aid and support to people who are going to face this kind of repression. So, Mike, I'm glad you raised it. It will require some legwork, and you came up with a great name. It's beautiful, and maybe set up a website. Use that quote. And let's talk now very quickly. We're going to go fluoridation of water in a minute or two, but I do want to talk with Dave Saltman. Dave, we earlier discussed that Leonard Tribe, the very famous constitutional lawyer from Harvard, has raised the issue of the 14th Amendment with Donald Trump taking power. Do you want to explain that a bit, please?
Yeah, and let me just lay out the facts as I understand them. I've talked this over with a very sharp lawyer, and I really am saying this to get the opinion of the meeting here, because I'm not clear on whether this is a good way to go or a terrible way to go. But here are the facts as Lawrence Tribe describes them in a memo that I saw. You probably all know this, and forgive me, but the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment very explicitly states that anyone who has been, they don't use the word convicted, but anyone who has participated in insurrection shall not be eligible to take any oath of office of any position in the United States, period. And this is considered to be a self-executing section of the Constitution. In other words, no enforcement is required. It's simply like saying, if you weren't born in the country, you can't be president. Well, anyway, the history of it is interesting, but I won't go into it now. So the question is it a good idea to invoke this and prevent Trump from holding office? And how you would do that, I mean, it's kind of a question of who's going to bell the cat, who's going to enforce this, and how would that be done? And let me just add one other thing that's also in the Constitution. The only way to remove the onus of insurrection is by a 2/3 vote of both houses of Congress. So Congress has the ability to remedy this, but only Congress, and that's it. That's all there is to it. So the question is, my son is a very sharp lawyer, and I asked him, I said, what do you think about this? And he said, it's a good idea. However, what happens if you actually invoke this against Trump successfully? Then what? We have no president. We have nothing. The government there's nothing that says that the line of succession is activated. We don't have the president has not taken the oath of office. Vance has, I don't know. What is the situation? Does the government and the country fall apart? Or another option would be someone like Bernie Sanders introduces this on the floor of the Congress, and Congress says, okay, we're gonna give them a bye on this one, and 2/3 of the Congress vote to seat Trump. But then in a way, Congress kind of has the upper hand. I don't know. I'm confused, frankly. What do you think?
Well, Steve Caruso, you've got a hand. You want to jump in on that? There's no doubt that what you say is true. The
Right.
14th Amendment was passed after the Civil War to
Right.
prevent Confederate officers from retaking power.
Correct.
And here we are, Steve Caruso, and then
Yeah,
Anna.
well, this is what we were screaming back in 2020, when 147 people of the House were concurring with Trump saying the election was stolen. And now Brian Tyler Cohen and the lawyer Kirshner were discussing this and saying that, yes, Colorado said that he was an insurrectionist, but the Supreme Court said that he can be on the ballot. They didn't say anything about he could win to be president, Oh, he can be on the ballot. So the continuation of the government at that point, if you got Elon Musk in there doing all this, I want to sound partisan or nonpartisan, but you just see what's going on. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Thanks.
Well, let me just address that point. That's a very good point. The Supreme Court in Trump versus Anderson took on the Colorado Supreme Court's case, which basically said the Colorado Supreme Court case said he's definitely guilty of insurrection. That's like not even a question. The question is whether or not he can be on the ballot in Colorado. And the Supreme Court ruling didn't touch the idea of insurrection. It just said states don't have the right to keep a guy off the federal ballot. That was the sum total of the Trump versus Anderson decision. So, in other words, the Supreme Court let stand the finding that he was guilty of insurrection. I don't know where that brings us, but that was addressed in the memo.
Yeah, I think we need to stick
Anna
with the
Georgi?
Constitution. Sorry.
No, that's all right, Anna. Oh, wait, you're muted, Anna. Hold on. Go ahead, try again.
Yeah,
Yeah, there you go.
yeah. Hi, everybody. I have missed a couple of these, partly because that's when our group planning an event in Western Massachusetts for January 18th that is called For Our Projects 2025. And so we're coming back with presenting all the things that we're working on and planning. The thing that I am really missing in this conversation, and maybe someone has done it, is a real analysis of all the dirty tricks, all the things that really cast a big question on whether Trump won this, Some of it I've heard on your show, the fact that in the 7 swing states, he got just above the level needed for a mandatory recount. The Greg Palast, before he went off, about the ongoing suppression of black votes, and there's been so many dirty tricks over decades, the gerrymandering, that I think we need a real movement. I think we can build a movement because people can't believe, and I don't think we want the world to think this is what Americans want. This is not what Americans want. And I believe it's not what they voted for either. But we need something that we all can say, this, and this makes this an illegitimate presidency. And I just want to say one more thing. Today, I heard Elon Musk congratulated and supports the AfD in Germany. This is the right-wing party that there is a big movement to ban, to make illegal. And if they don't do it soon, it may be too late. So we've got a lot to talk about besides self-defense, and I think in a certain way, the best defense is a good offense. And you guys have years of experience, and I think we can really use it. The last thing I want to say is the day of the inauguration is Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk about that too. So that's just what I wanted to say.
And Anna, real quickly, could you please tell people how we can get involved with your efforts there?
Well, this is Franklin County. So we will, I'll send it to whatever whatever you want. We have our new poster, but we've got so many groups that want to co-sponsor. It's really exciting. And we're going to do a lot of publicity about it. And we're going to say, this is where our community's at, because even though we're at a blue state and we have a terrific, except for Richard Neal, we have a really good legislative representation, state, and Jim McGovern. Look what he's just, done recently, asking for Danziger to be, reinstalled and all that. He instigated that letter in Congress. He's our congressman. We have just great representation, and we have to back them up. I mean, the Democratic Party is, I mean, there was something in the Times yesterday about, let's have an opposition party, people. Yeah. And yeah. So anyway, it will be online at traprock.org.
If you'll put that in the chat, that'd be great. TRAPROCK.org. Well,
Right.
Anna is in Western Massachusetts, if you were wondering, near where the Shays Rebellion occurred in 1787. So, Anna, that's good to hear from you. And okay,
real quick, Sluggo, Paul Newman in the chat urged us to correct Anna. It's Democratic Party, not Democrat Party. That seems to be what a lot of fascists say, just to be kind of jerks about it. And we're not partisan.
I think they're very democratic.
Well, that's something else to be talked about. But it arose as a propaganda tool to discredit the entire Democratic Party. And while we're not partisan here, we wouldn't let people use diminutive for the Republican Party, the Green Party, or anything else. So just as a matter of accuracy and basic respect, we say Democratic Party. We don't play little name games, like the right wingers do.
Well, let's hope as we proceed that the Democratic Party becomes a little more democratic. That would be wonderful. Anna, did you want to say something? Then Barbara Harris.
Yes, it's not on the front page yet, but if you click it, see our latest newsletter, it opens with the announcement of it, the very first announcement.
Okay.
But there's stuff going on January 18th all over. But I really think we need this proof. I think it's something like 26% of voters voted for him, and though a lot of that's in question, there were explosions. Let's pull this together.
We're talking about compiling a lot of the questions surrounding the election. Just remember that Donald Trump ran for president of the United States 3 times and never once got a majority of the voting constituency, though. So there you go.
That's not it. This is an older one.
Okay, Barbara Harrison, go ahead. Anna,
yes, what I just wanted to say was, for me to create change, we need to create an inclusive movement, which means crossing ethnic, class, and cultural boundaries. I have found progressives, I live in Ithaca, New York, where Cornell is, they're very reluctant to move outside of their own cubicles, so to speak. And we need to form relationships, then listen and bring information to different communities of people if we're going to create change. So anyway, I'll leave it there.
All right, thank you for that, Barbara. Much appreciated. Melissa Hall, go ahead, Melissa. Oh, wait, you're muted. Sorry. My fault here. Let's go. There you go. Go ahead.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Sorry I'm late. Anyway, I've been signing petition after petition. I read political writings on YouTube. I've tried to call the White House today, but they're only Tuesday through Thursday open for the comment line. What else can I do locally to help Leonard Peltier get free?
Well, at this point, the Sign the Amnesty International petition.
Which I did.
That's the one I've known the most about, and that's about what we got at this point. You know, this is a critical moment, and our government has been unresponsive and is about to get even more unresponsive, I believe. Thank you for that, Melissa. But
If you can't get them on the phone line, you can write them, send them an email at whitehouse.gov. I don't have but that will get to them also. So you don't, if you can't make telephone contact.
Yeah, okay. And then
Thank
also,
you.
I have a disability and I'm prepared to be arrested either way for speaking out against this guy, Trump. I
Yeah.
mean,
I'm sure you'll get an opportunity. I'm sure you have many
um,
opportunities in the coming
so,
years.
like you said, you guys were talking about getting a legal team in case that happens.
Well, we'll have to, that'll be an ongoing discussion. I think we'll take it up
Yeah.
next week, hopefully in a little, somebody needs to set up a network of lawyers that would respond to people who are assaulted by the regime. We have to be prepared to do that.
Especially since if you think what's happening in Palestine can happen here, think again, the darker the skin, the more you're in danger, and they can make up shit.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa.
Melissa, can
Maybe-
I just jump in? Melissa, if you are gonna plan on protesting, awesome. But what you can do and what you ought to do, and I speak from experience on this,
Yeah.
is either locate a lawyer who you have gotten in touch with ahead of time and write their phone number on your arm before you go
Okay.
in marker Sharpie, or contact the ACLU near you and let them know your situation. And make sure that somebody has your back before you get arrested. And that's more important now
Thank you.
than 2
Take
years
care.
ago.
Thank you.
Because yeah, it's more important now than 2 years ago, because now we don't necessarily have the courts to help us get out.
Yeah.
We might have lawyers, but we might not have the judges. So we don't know yet, you know, depending on where a person lives. So
wait, see how the atmosphere is before I do something.
Yeah,
Okay.
what the atmosphere is going to be going forward is going to be pretty nasty, as we all know. So let's be prepared. Let's have a network. The ACLU is one of the groups. There's the Lawyers Guild. There are in the NAACP. So we need to have a network. Mike HERSH and others to put together with a website where people can register and also then have a set response from a legal team somewhere somehow.
Oh, Sluggo, real quick reminder to everybody, we're going to be going out on the air on the radio, so no swear words unless they're in Yiddish, which is
Right.
permissible.
Yes, we do
So,
accept Yiddish.
Okay, I will try not to swear in the future.
Yes.
appreciate that.
We did give Greg Pallas a pass on that, but it caused Steve Caruso many hard minutes of editing. So we'll try and keep it clean from here on.
What did they say in the Nixon Watergate days? Expletive deleted.
Yeah, something like that. Catherine Stearns. Catherine, did you want to jump in here?
Yes, thank you. A couple of things that came to mind listening to everybody else speak. Since 2017, here in the Mid-Willamette Valley of Oregon, we have managed to stay together, a coalition of progressive groups, by meeting every other week. When we formed in 2017, we also developed a rapid response network to share information, et cetera, et cetera. At our latest Zoom meeting, we had a wonderful speaker who gave us a lot of good information about other platforms to use for meetings and for sharing information that are more secure than Zoom. And then I told you about that. The Mid-Valley Solidarity Coalition is sponsoring an event on January 20th called the Festival of Resistance. Resist, Rise, Love, Create. And our workshops and presenters will be talking about those different themes, and they'll be tabling by other all the different groups in the area who want to participate in this. We know from January 20th of 2017. People in this area really want something else to do. And the last thing is, in Eugene, there is the Civil Liberties Defense Center, and they have online trainings. Know your rights about street protest and know your rights about when talking to the police. And you can get that information at their website. It's the Civil Liberties Defense Center in Eugene, Oregon. Thank you.
Well, put that in the chat, please. You know, I know it's a little late, but maybe we should all rush and go to law school, and then pass the bar quickly. Salty, go ahead, Dave Saltman.
Well, I wasn't going to bring this up, but I think and I don't want to be a scaremonger, although that does seem to be my role in life these days. But I was in Brazil during the dictatorship. I spent a lot of time there during the dictatorship. And I'm here to tell you, a lawyers guild isn't gonna cut it. People just disappear. Everyone knows who Walter Cronkite is. The Brazilian Walter Cronkite just disappeared one day. He went to the DOPS. That's what they called it in Brazil. The DOPS was the political police. You know, if the FBI is truly weaponized the way they're threatening, and if Elon Musk is truly the new Rasputin, we're going to have to mobilize a lot more than forming 3 times a week support groups. I mean, we're talking about, these guys don't mess around. These people who, the Walter Cronkite of Brazil, after he disappeared, was found a few months later hanged in his jail cell. They said he hanged himself with his own belt. And his family said, wait, he wasn't wearing a belt that day. I mean, this is more dire, in my opinion, than we're giving it credit for. And a big issue is the media. How are we going to communicate? I don't have the answer, but I will tell you what they did in Brazil, and it was just kind of an ad hoc response, but it worked really well in a way. There were a lot of really great artists, especially the musicians of Brazil, Chico Buarque and Tom Jobim and these guys. And they basically created a new kind of art that was that told the story of today, but that pretended it was happening in ancient times. It would sort of be like doing Aeschylus, but with a modern day touch to it. So I don't have the answer here, but I think we got to take this more.
Oh, I think everybody's taking it seriously.
I didn't mean that they weren't taking it seriously. I think we got to really think about self-defense. Let's put it that way.
Well, let's talk about it next week. We're almost out of time this week, but we definitely want to take this up. We do want to have a network that people can contact if they're about to disappear or if they still have their cell phone. I mean, the one thing they didn't have, Salty, when you were in Brazil is the internet. And we'll see what use we can make of it. But this is a discussion we're going to have now. So we will have this next week. People need to think about it. Mike, maybe we can talk about setting up an actual network. I love the use of the German poem there. Mike, you want to speak? Go ahead, Mike. And then we do have to get to fluoride in the last couple minutes. Go ahead, Mike.
I just want to underscore, David, you're absolutely right. This is not just going to be, a bail money ring or, a hotline for lawyers, because that will not get it done. That's why I reference things like the Underground Railroad, committees of correspondence, and I'm very thankful that you brought up Brazil. I have a good friend who grew up during the days of the junta there. And I asked her, how did you live? How did people communicate? And she told me that there were a number of brave artists, people of stature, who used humor and misdirection and symbolism to criticize the regime. And little by little, a critical mass formed, and they were able to overthrow that junta. And I think we're going to have to make plans and learn from their example. So I look forward to you working with us and informing us on how to put that effective resistance in place if we need it, and it looks like we're going to need it.
Well, in nonviolent terms, it is generally recognized that the most effective tool to use against a dictator is ridicule. And I do have to say that Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel have it down to a science, but whether they're still going to be on the air or whether they're going to disappear is another question. So thank you for that, Dave. Mimi, I know you want to kick in, and we promised a brief discussion on fluoridization, and MYLA, you have a hand as well.
Yeah, super brief. David, thanks for saying that about Brazil. But this is here. Trump's folks, when they sent the feds into Portland during Black Lives Matter, they were trying to disappear protesters on the street in black vans. This was happening. We saw it happen. Fortunately, some of the people we were able to do grab backs and get them out. But others were driven around the blocks. The people who were driving them didn't even really know what to do, but they were feds. And they were no names, no badges, nothing. And these have gone to court now. And some of them are still in court in Portland. But this is happening here. Like, you don't need to go to South America anymore to be disappeared. And Portland was a training ground for all of this. And I'm just putting that out there, that I do think, David, that what you were saying is something that a lot of people aren't really on board with yet. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way or, demeaning way. This is so beyond, let's just get some groups together to see how we can maybe help each other out. This is hardcore fascism that we were watching go down in Portland. People got killed. People got shot in the forehead for holding up a radio. People in wheelchairs who were protesting are in the hospital. 3 women have died from being shot by, this guy in a small little park during a protest.
I agree with you 100%.
Defense.
Well, let's do it. I think sorry, go ahead, Nate.
As far as I'm concerned, getting any kind of network together is a positive. It's a great thing, How it's going to do, we don't know. What we do know is this is going to be bad. It's going to be worse than most people think. And in the long run, we are going to see people disappear, just like journalists have been disappearing. But this time it's going to be protesters, because Trump and his people do not want to deal with us.
MYLA?
And so many people live in a bubble, Mimi. They didn't see what you saw in Portland, and they believe that it can't happen here. But I actually was going to pivot, if that's okay. I'm putting in the chat a link to an organization called the Fluoride Action Network. And do we have a guest lined up for to talk about fluoride?
Someone last week wanted to talk about it, but I don't know
Right.
what happened to that person.
Well, I recommend that. Can you see this website?
Yeah.
The Fluoride Action Network. I put the link in the chat. It was
Hey,
founded.
MYLA, this is great, but can we hit pause and have a couple people weigh in on the previous topic?
Oh, no,
And
no,
I know
no.
we're going a little bit over, but
we're almost
I'm-
done here. I only see one hand. Melissa.
And Michael
John.
Johnson as well, but I was just going to take another 2 seconds.
Yeah, go ahead, MYLA, please.
And that is, we're going to try to find Dr. Paul Connett, who started this Fluoride Action Network as a guest. And I've got another item after we wrap up this one, if that's okay,
Yeah.
Harvey.
Yes, Mike, that's fine, a fine point. I do want to just mention, for the record, for what it's worth, I 100% agree with Bobby Kennedy on getting fluoride out of the water. If for no other reason, I raised 5 kids, and we did use tap water for formula. And when you take fluoridized water and put it into baby formula, you vastly, I think unhealthily, concentrate the dose. So we'll come back to that. Michael Johnson, you haven't spoken, Michael?
Yes, good afternoon, good evening.
Yeah.
The day when they had that insurrection, the guards, was supposed to be called to stop the people that were running into the the capital and damaging things and trying to create a shutdown of the government. But they were not successful, and thanks to Vice President Mike, forgot his name.
Pence, Mike Pence.
Pence, that's insisted that he was not going out with the secret serviceman because he knows he has a job to do, at the Capitol. Now, the thing is, the military, the Pentagon was also notified, and guess what the Pentagon did? Rather than come to help, us that are trying to stop the Capitol Police getting beat up and all that, they sent their generals to protect the generals and, the military personnel. I don't think Trump has any authority to call the National Guard to protect him on that day, because the National Guard knew that Trump was wrong. So we were talking about lawyers getting them, protecting us and helping us here and there, but I think the lawyers should be working with the
Well,
anyway,
with the general public.
The that are in the Pentagon. That's what I was trying to think of, because if they can get involved and let this guy know that this is not democracy and they are not going to work with them to arrest innocent people, and because he was talking about even shooting the chief of the military,
Right.
assassinating this person and that person that are either military generals and ambassadors, because they don't like him. You just for a country this big, you just do not want to abuse your privileges, and that is what I'm reading, that we can get rid of him by using the 14th Amendment. And, but we need to get the military involved.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Michael. We're out of time, basically. It's 3 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Eastern. We promised just an hour. If you want to get in a quick comment, please raise your hand. Melissa again, and then I will make a brief comment about fluoride, and then we will meet again for 1 hour a week from today. And hopefully we'll be celebrating the release of Leonard Peltier. But we certainly will be raising the issue again, and maybe next week we'll have Chase Iron Eyes with us. Go ahead, Melissa, and then we're going to wrap it up. MYLA has a hand, and then we'll go.
Mimi, I want to ask Mimi a quick question. In Portland, is there still problems from that protest, and how can we support them?
Mimi German?
Yeah. Hi. The protests, well, there are still people in court, who have court trials that are ongoing. But I think people are now just honestly preparing for whatever is next. And in Portland, that means on the streets.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Mimi, MYLA, last word, and then we're going to rock and roll.
Yeah, can you see this?
Oh, yeah.
This is the RFK Stadium in Washington, D.C., and there was a surprise coalition of Democrats and Republicans who together stood up to both Elon Musk and Donald J. Trump. And they transferred control of this close to 200 acres to the city of Washington, D.C. And it's a wonderful development, from what I understand, for the city. There can be development, and we'll continue this conversation at some point in time, but I just wanted to show you this picture. It was Saturday night. The Senate surprised everybody and defied both Musk and Trump.
Very good, very interesting. And I will say that Donald Trump is now seriously talking about taking back the Panama Canal. Lots of luck with that one. But in terms of RFK, everybody should remember that. Well, you won't, most of you are too young, but in 1970, I believe it was, or 71, 15,000 protesters were locked into RFK by Richard Nixon to stop a major anti-war protest. I was at that protest, but I decided to drop acid and go back to Vermont before everybody was arrested. Had I gotten arrested, I believe I would have gotten a check for $10,000. The people who were arrested and held in RFK were compensated. And I will also, even more importantly, point out that in 1991, when I was hired by Greenpeace to head the nuclear campaign, the head of Greenpeace at the time, Peter Bayhuth, took me to a Grateful Dead concert in RFK, and that no doubt is why it belongs to the people. The Grateful Dead, for those of you who are Deadheads, played Dark Star that night, and it poured down rain through the whole concert. So I hope they put up a plaque to that concert and to the arrests when the city of Washington inherits RFK Stadium. Listen, everybody, 70 people with us, longest attention span anywhere. We are going to adjourn as promised. Join us again next week. Hopefully, we'll be celebrating the release of Joe Biden. Take a look at the piece at freepress.org. Mike, let's get going on starting that network. And everybody, have a great Christmas. Christmas this year, by the way, very rare. Christmas and Hanukkah are on the same day. The first day of Hanukkah actually starts on Christmas this year. So everybody enjoy. Let's be happy. Let's prepare for the coming years. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you, MYLA, everybody. And we'll see you next week. No nukes, everybody.
Free Leonard.
Free Leonard. And shut Diablo Canyon, for God's sakes. See you next week. No nukes.
No,